when people were working from home, they didn't have coworkers around them that give them that sense of responsibility or accountability. There was also so much unpredictability, and that's hard for somebody who has ADHD when that structure goes away and they're expected to do it on their own. It's like this whole new world. And so that's why people were reaching out to me. And right away, it felt like this is the right thing. This is, how I want to focus. And so there were some good things that came out of COVID for me. It wasn't necessarily easy, but it worked out.
Welcome to Women and Work, the show where we take an inside look at how women are overcoming our own unique challenges as we grow our careers or build a business while nurturing relationships and family. I'm Diane Mocha, founder and CEO of MomSub, the childcare app that connects working mothers to a substitute mom. And I want you to know that work can fit your life. Our guests show you the way they've done it. Today, I'm with Suzy Carbrey, an ADHD coach who started her career as a speech-language pathologist. She now uses her training to help people who are chronically busy and disorganized so they can more easily solve problems and regulate behavior. This is a common issue for many professionals, and I want to thank you, Suzy, for sharing your journey about how you're helping those people. So I understand that your field is pretty dominated by women, but many of your clients are men. So I want to know how that has presented different challenges and what you think some of the biggest or most unique challenges were that you faced because you were a woman.
That's an interesting question. I feel like probably the biggest challenge that I face as a woman, as many women do, is balancing family and kids and all the things that we have to organize, the logistics and decision making that we're doing in the background.
Trying to do it all, be it all, and not, accepting that that's not realistic, right?
Yeah.
And so when you talk about serving people with ADHD who are confronted by this busyness and disorganization, is that something that affected you in particular?
Yeah, I think I definitely have my own executive functioning differences, which is the biggest part of my work. So, a lot of people with ADHD have challenges with executive functioning. For me, it's a lot of like working memory or attention differences, and so I've really gotten to a place where I can set up my environment and my systems that support me really well, and now I can listen to others and hear how their brains work and help them do the same.
So explain kind of what executive functioning is and how it impairs people when they're not in a traditional way of dealing with those kinds of issues.
Yeah, so executive functioning at its most simple is what our brain is doing when we're getting things done. So it's everything from organizing our thoughts, pulling out our priorities, creating a plan, and then regulating ourselves so that we can follow through with our plans and ultimately achieve what we want to achieve and reach our goals.
Is it harder now because we have so much coming at us? We have social media. We have just 24/7 information. We're not at a lack of for knowledge, right? But we're almost overloaded because of the way society is nowadays. Does that contribute to it or make it harder for people who already have this challenge?
I think it does. I think for everybody, we're all inundated with information. We're inundated with requests and expectations, and we're inundated with news and things that might cause background thoughts, and all of that's going to affect our executive functioning. It's going to affect how we can prioritize and focus and zone in on what we need to. I think there's also a lot of like quick media that gets us out of practice of maintaining our attention for long amounts of time, and all of those things do impact our executive functioning skills.
hmm So tell me back when you were a kid or in college, did you know that you wanted to go into this area of helping people with communication? And then how did your career evolve from then?
Yeah, I think I had a really long route to get here. I did a lot of things before I became a speech language pathologist. I worked in retail management for a long time. I knew I did not like that. So I went to school to become a massage therapist. And that was never my ultimate goal, but I wanted to have a job outside of retail while I went to school. And then I started studying everything random, whatever I was interested in. And I took a course that was called Career Exploration. And within this course, you just spent a whole semester learning about yourself, taking personality tests, learning about different careers. And your big project at the end was coming up with a career that fit for you. I came up with speech language pathology at the end, but I wasn't quite ready to commit to graduate school. And I remember asking my career counselor or my advisory counselor, like, what am I closest to get a degree? And so I ended up getting a degree in art history. But by the time I finished my art history degree, I knew I wanted to go right into speech language pathology. So I then went right to grad school, went to speech language pathology, and I've always been interested in cognition, which executive functions are cognitive skills. So from that point, I really felt like I'm on the right track. I'm so interested in cognition and brains and communication and how we show up, the way that we want to. And so right away, that was a good fit for me. And I focused on adult medical cases usually. That's what we do as speech language pathologists is we rehab cognition and communication for adults that have had brain injuries or neurologic conditions. And then from that, I got burnout and I wanted to take what I know, what I'm interested in, and apply it to everyday people. And that's really kind of how I ended up where I am now.
So let's talk about burnout because so many people nowadays are dealing with it. When did you realize? Were you juggling other things in your life as well? And how did you recognize it was time to make a change? What was going on in both your personal and professional life?
Yeah, I think as a parent of a young child, I was getting maybe stressed with balancing both and working in the medical field, you don't really get holidays off or you don't get to pick your schedule. And so there can be a lot of challenges with logistics. There's also there's also some things that happen with working under insurance rules where you don't always get to do what feels best clinically or do what feels best ethically. Like you get pressure to do things because of insurance, right? Insurance is footing the bill. And so I've always been entrepreneurial in nature too. So I started thinking like, okay, I should open a private practice and just see what happens. And so I was working on building my private practice on the side. And it wasn't necessarily, this is going to be my whole thing. I'm switching right away. Just let's see what happens. And so my business entity was finalized the same day that Illinois shut down for COVID.
Oh, wow. So you thought you were going to dip your toes in the water and then things changed rapidly. So how many kids did you have at that time? How old were they? Did you have support at home? How were you managing, their care?
Yeah, so at that time, I have one son. Um, I'm a foster parent, so sometimes I have two, but
Okay.
at that time I had one, my son, and he would have been about 7.
And that's your biological son.
Uh-huh.
So you gave birth to him. You had been caring, for a child for 7 years. And then did you have a partner?
Yes, so I'm married,
Okay.
and I think one of the bigger challenges with the timing of COVID was balancing my job, balancing a business, balancing school from home.
Yeah, many people were pulling out their hair then. Yes.
Yes, and so there was a lot happening, but my real job was kind of tanking because we weren't admitting new patients. Lots of things were changing within medical settings during that time, the first, 6 months especially. But it worked out because it gave me the time and the capacity to focus on my business. It also gave me the inspiration to open a tele-practice that never was in my plan. But now I'm so thankful for the life balance that having a tele-practice gives me. Like it's amazing to work from home and set my own schedule. And so that has opened up a lot of things for me. I also wasn't quite sure how I would zone in and focus, what demographic I would target. I knew I didn't want to work with people who had had these big, severe, life changing things anymore. I wanted a shift from that. And because of COVID, everybody who was reaching out to me to improve things like attention and memory and time management and organization, they were adults with ADHD who had been pushed to work from home.
And
And
they were having trouble
and they were having
managing
trouble.
because the
Absolutely.
workplace has different structures in place that maybe help keep them on task and knowing like what to do moment to moment, hour to hour.
For sure. And so when people were working from home, they didn't have coworkers around them, and that
Mm.
gives them that sense of responsibility or accountability. There was also so much unpredictability, and that's hard for somebody who has ADHD when that structure goes away and they're expected to do it on their own. It's like this whole new world. And so that's why people were reaching out to me. And right away, it felt like this is the right thing. This is, how I want to focus. And so there were some good things that came out of COVID for me. It wasn't necessarily easy, but it worked out.
Mm-hmm. And how old is your son now?
He's 12.
12.
Hmm.
Okay.
Hmm.
And so back when he was 7, 5 years ago, when you were just sort of launching this business, what were you doing for childcare? He was in school during the day. Were you able to adjust your hours? You said you didn't have as much control over your schedule as you liked. Did he have to, be picked up or go to an after school program? How did you manage that?
Yeah, I would say I was just scrambling. So before COVID, we had a daycare where I was able to kind of flex pickup and drop off times, which helped a lot, especially with before and
So when
after
he wasn't
care.
in school, he could be there.
Yeah.
They could handle transportation. During the summer, he could be there.
Yes, or in a summer camp program. So I'm not from here, and so we really don't have any family here.
Oh.
And so we would always rely on, a summer camp program or before or after care, that kind of thing.
Mm.
Once COVID hit, we really didn't have anything. Luckily my husband worked from home, and so he could be home when my son was in school, half the time sitting under the
Mm.
desk, what
Mm-hmm.
that was like for a first grader at the time with minimal supervision while parents are trying to work. But we did work it out, and once he went back to school, life got a lot easier.
Mm-hmm. And so at this time, how do you manage those different priorities? And have you found ways that you're balancing that might be helpful to others?
Yeah, I think I have a lot of fortunate circumstances working for myself. I can flex my schedule. I can do pickup or drop off when I need to. And now my son is older. He's in middle school now. So naturally, he's much more independent too. But I think you have to step back and think about, what are my priorities? What is really most important here? I find for me specifically, I do best when I'm not multitasking, so regardless of if I'm working or if I'm parenting, trying to only do that helps me a lot, but also taking advantage of these little pockets of time that open up and being productive when I can, because it does add up.
Mm-hmm. It does. But then you have this work creep that gets through all of your life. So, do you feel sometimes after he goes to sleep that I should open up the laptop and get some work done? Do you have certain boundaries, or do you find yourself working more and at times when maybe you wish you didn't, sitting on the bleachers responding to an email when, did you see my goal? And you're like, oh no, I was not looking up. How has having your own business influenced the work creeping into other areas of your life that maybe it didn't before, when you could just close the door and go home from the job?
Yeah, I think I have a bit of sense of that, but I do rely on a lot of structures and organization and system. And so in my mind, I do have work hours, and I try to stick to them pretty well.
Hmm.
Not that that doesn't happen, it does. But actually, when I was in grad school, my son was 3 months old, and I had this really reflective period where he didn't have daycare at that time either. And so I was trying to raise a newborn. I was trying to go to grad school. And that first semester, I had a really big aha that I don't do good doing both at the same time. Like, I really need to compartmentalize my focus and what I'm doing when, because then I can show up as my full self. And I think that's something that stuck with me for years. And still, I'm pretty good about doing that, where I have my work hours, I have my off hours. If I'm doing something outside of work hours, it's something I'm just super excited about, and it doesn't necessarily feel like work. And I'm not saying that I don't reply to those emails. I do.
But you do put up those boundaries.
But I do put up
And
those
you do try to
boundaries.
say when being mindful, right, of being present wherever you are, whether that's you're working on a project and he comes in and says, can you get me a snack? Well, you're old enough to get your own snack, I've got to finish this. Or you're at the game saying, I don't care what's buzzing in my purse, I'll figure it out later, I want to make sure I don't miss anything.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so you mentioned foster children. So have you had foster children in your life? Are you open to having that again? With the talk of burnout and being overwhelmed, why did you get involved in a program like that, and how has that impacted you?
So that's something we've done for years. I would say I think that door has closed. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of stress, and it's a lot to balance. Like dealing with the system is way more than I think I would have ever realized. So we've had a couple foster children, the longest for 14 months, and I feel like it's been really insightful and really gratifying to help a child, but it's also a lot of work. And I feel like that's something that I don't know that I would do again, but I'm always very involved in volunteering and different things and trying things. And I think also I like novelty, and so I like switching up, what I'm doing and how I'm helping. But that certainly had its own challenges for balancing things. I think anybody who has multiple children, it's a whole new level of executive functioning and prioritizing and putting up those boundaries and structures around your time and your tasks. And so it was a good learning experience for sure.
Did any of it have to do with the fact that you wanted a sibling, even if it was short term for your child? Were you able to specify, hey, we just want a boy? Did you want a brother for him? And how did he feel about this? And, not just at the start, but then when that person went away.
I think our son has always been content being an only child. He's excited, to be with other kids, and um, but I feel like we've always all been on the same page. Like this is something we're gonna do. We're helping our community. It's temporary, and we've always been on the same page with that. So he was always fine to be an only child, and I think now that he's back to being an only child, he's enjoying, the more time and attention that he gets from us. But I think it's been a great way to model just helping the community, and he himself has become really involved in volunteering at our local food pantry. And so it's neat to see how he takes his own interests and then, helps out or gets involved in different ways.
Well, you said you yourself like to have some aspect of community service in your life. So you're role modeling that for him. And you
Hmm.
do that even knowing it's going to put more on your plate, lead a little bit more to overwhelm. So why? And what do you recommend to others who are like, but I have to do this. It's part of me. I want to do this. But then when I do, I feel like I can't say no. And then I'm torn, and then I'm not getting enough sleep. And, how do you balance that and what do you tell others?
Yeah, I think you have to say no when you need to. You have to recognize when you've done enough. And I think anytime we're contributing, it doesn't have to be permanent. A lot of things when we help out, it accumulates. And so I think find things that you're really interested in because it's not going to feel like as much work. I like to do things that I can do on my own time. So we do a lot of like litter pickup or food pantry reclamation kind of stuff. And so we're still volunteering, but it's kind of on my own schedule and in my own time. And that feels like a good balance for me. But I think you have to be aware when you've taken on too much and then you put up those boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Do you think your career took a particular trajectory because you were a woman, because you had a child? And what do you think then is going to happen in the future as he becomes a teenager and then eventually moves out on his own?
Yeah, I think it's very interesting the field that, I got in first as a speech language pathologist. It is primarily women.
Mm-hmm.
And so that I think being a female is more likely to go into that field and to be in one of those helping roles. And then I think definitely being a parent has shaped me wanting to be an entrepreneur and wanting to work for myself and have that work life balance. I think as my son has gotten older, life has gotten easier because he is rather independent and he can do a lot for himself. And so I imagine we'll be balancing different things, but I think, especially because of the work that I do, I'm always thinking about balance and organizational strategies and systems, and how can we essentialize and really just focus on what matters.
Now, you mentioned, and we talked about that already, the fact that there's a lot of women in this field, but yet you said early in your career when you were working for someone, you didn't really have that flexibility that you craved in terms of your work hours. So that seems surprising in an environment with so many women. The people in charge are women, many are nurturers, many have their own families. What was it that didn't allow that flexibility, with being able to go part-time or limit your hours or leave earlier? Was it just that organization, or do you think it's a mindset of societal pressures on the business world itself?
Probably a bit of both. I think for me, I mainly worked in inpatient medical settings, so people always have to be there. They're, especially as a speech language pathologist, we do a lot of swallowing therapy, and so I had to be there very early to be around for breakfast. Or you people still need therapy and rehab on holidays. So I think for me, a lot of it was the environment that I chose. Working in inpatient,
It's a
people need to be there.
24/7, 365.
Yes.
So everyone's going to have their share of holidays, nights. And so, it's just the function. If you're a fireman, you're going to have to work, some
Yeah.
nights, weekends, whenever.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. So it's a function of that. And so it wasn't necessarily a function of who you were around, but that would be true regardless of what kind of medical therapy you were administering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so now you're doing something very different. And do people right away understand and gravitate to this idea of an ADHD coach? Is this something kind of new? I mean, there's always been, for a long time, as long as we've been talking about ADHD therapies and things like that. But to hear an ADHD coach is a little bit different. And how do you educate people on that? And how is it different than going and just seeing someone for therapy for that particular situation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the biggest differences between somebody with ADHD going for therapy and seeing a coach is that in therapy, they're really addressing the mental health and emotional components of having ADHD, where coaching is much more action and strategy focused. Oftentimes it's goal oriented, and therapy is as well. But what are your goals, and what are the actions that you can take to get there? And a part of my role is really about figuring out how somebody's brain works and helping them come up with and experiment with personalized strategies that can help them compensate, help them show up in the way that they want, even if their brain is functioning differently. So that's the big difference between therapy and coaching. Now, the awareness of coaching, even in the last 5 years that I've been doing it, I've seen such a change. I feel like when I started, I was always explaining what is executive functioning, what is coaching, why might this help, what is neurodivergence, right? And now I feel like we're hearing these words all the time. There's lots and lots of people who are getting diagnosed with ADHD later in life than there used to be. And so there's really been a big boom and awareness of these things. And so I feel like I've had to educate less. But really, from the beginning, I've been really active on social media. I write a weekly blog post, I write a weekly newsletter, and a lot of that is just education, free content, awareness. It's good brand awareness for me, but it's been kind of a way that I've been able to contribute to that. But I'm just seeing that in the world, that there's so much more awareness about these sorts of issues.
Well, we thank you for sharing that information with the public. I'm sure it's useful for so many people, even if they don't get coaching, just to see all the tips and tidbits that you share online. And, we really appreciate the insights that you've shared today on our Women in Work podcast.
Thank you
If
so much for having me.
Thank you for being here, Suzy. And if you were inspired by Suzy's story, we want you to share it with a friend, leave a review, and subscribe to meet our next amazing guest. If you want to invest in a solution to the childcare crisis, check out MomSub's equity crowdfunding campaign at momsub.com/invest, or connect with Mom Sub on LinkedIn, Facebook, or Instagram. That's Mom Sub, like a substitute mom. And remember, your career, your choices, and your success are yours to define. Keep pushing boundaries and spreading your love and encouragement to other women who need it.